This conference will now be recorded.
Thanks, Matt.
You're welcome. Everyone's awake now, right?
For the people that are here in the room, raise your hand if you were able to find a parking spot at the GWP parking lot today.
I got the last one.
Stephen, you got one?
I did.
Anyone else? Okay.
Take the train down from Alexandria.
I guess that's like a wise thing to do these days. Not parking the BRE parking lot. All right, I'm just curious about that. So the next order of business is item 2, the roll call and determination of forms.
Good morning, everybody. From Boston County, Colorado.
Present.
Rodney White. Jacob Haslett. Leon Hughes. City of First Name Jackson.
Here.
Osama Mean. Here. Mike Craig. From Stafford County, Alex Oziak.
Here.
Brandon Brown.
Here.
Brian Council. From King George County, Nick Minor. From Wilson. From Caroline County, Mike Tension. From Pennington. From VDOT, Michelle Shropshire.
Here.
From Haynes.
Here.
Jim Ponticello. See online.
No.
From here, TC, Bob Schneider. Jake Bainsby. From here, PT, Sarah Williams. I think we can hear her there online.
Yep.
And Todd Horsley. From Fred at Union Court.
He's walking in.
Okay, thanks, Stacy. Craig Reed. From PRE, Christine Hefner. Nick Ruiz. Here. Engineer Drive Connect, Kate Gibson.
Here.
Lee Anderson. From HWA, Ivan Rucker. And FTA is vacant. We do have more.
Chair, we could also just recognize and welcome the new executive director of DWRC, Chip Boyle, recently appointed by the DWRC board, and we're very glad to have him. The vacancy is full, so we no longer have a vacancy at DWRC. So, welcome.
Thank you and good morning and hello. I don't know. Come on, dude. Thank you.
Looking forward to working with you.
All right.
All right, so next item is the approval of the TAC agenda for today. Does anyone have any comments or changes for the agenda?
Oh, we're gonna need to add a couple of fifth amendments. This is a meeting where we see that.
Policy committee meeting.
And what are the
Agenda.
amendments?
Fifth amendment is the UPC 119112. You probably maybe know about this project. It's the exit 126 stars improvements to round 4 smart scale. So it's a new project instead, going in because it's been accelerated. Those smart scale funds from round 4 are like for fiscal 25, 26, but we're not gonna wait that long for this. So we'd like to expedite that and put it on to the policy committee for approval this month. The other one is UPC 110382. That's garbage debt service interest that's on the UPC 13558, which was the exit 140. And that's just a change in funding, I believe, all that is right too.
This is the payment on the garbage one.
So those two.
So would it make sense to put those two items under 7D? Is that the case to the tip?
Perfect.
Well, I guess I'll make a motion that those two items be added to item 7D. Any discussion?
Thanks, Jim.
Is there a second? All in favor? Aye. Okay. So we're down to number 4, approval of the October 4th TAC meeting minutes. Did anyone have any comments or changes to the minutes? So hearing none, I'll make a motion to approve. Is there a second? All in favor? Aye. Okay, next item is a review of the October 18th, 2021 Policy Committee meeting with panelists.
Chair, as you know, I keep this very brief, so I've asked Matthew just to pull up the agenda from the meeting so you can see. We had the state rail plan presentation from DRPT. Just for those of you who aren't aware, the state rail plan, like the LRTP, gets updated about every 4 years. And so DRPT are currently in this process of reviewing their statewide rail plan. It includes freight, it includes passenger rail, and proposed new developments in the future. And to give Canva an opportunity to have some interaction with the people who are developing this plan, I invited Emily Stock to come and present the plan and where they are in the process. And they invited input from Canva. So the policy committee just gave their initial thoughts and input on the thing. There's some concern about storage of chemicals on freight lines close to the city, residential neighborhoods. They made that clear and made a couple of comments about some other things for the future they thought DRPD should be aware of. And some of those things they're already working on. But if this TAC also wishes to make input, they haven't got their materials online. And I would encourage you to just have a look at that. They did have a survey earlier this year, which some of you probably completed, to say this is what we're concerned about or not concerned about. But that survey tends to be very high level. So if any of our jurisdictions or TAC members have specific things that they want to be included in a statewide rail plan, the next 2 months are kind of your time to make those comments to the RPT and to suggest improvements and changes that you would like to see. So please do pay attention to that. The CTV discussion, we'll talk about that later on. You all know kind of where we are with that. And then the East-West mobility study, I just gave a very high level update that we've started the project. We're having our meetings and working on the technical memoranda that are part of that study. CMAC, Adam made a presentation just giving us an update on where we are and basically also letting them know that the status form subcommittee, so that the policy committee is aware of where we are in the process. Franchise bylaw discussion was requested by the chair of the policy committee, and they decided to request me to facilitate the meeting of the CIOs to look at 2 particular issues that they're concerned about in the policy committee bylaws, the one being the establishment and maintenance of quorum, the other one being the adding of items to the agenda at the last minute that need to be voted on. And so we're working through that process. That's all really, I think, to highlight at this stage. My own presentation and report just focused a little bit on what is the vision of Canva. We often focus very much on projects and individual items, but what's the overall picture? What are we trying to achieve as Canva? And so I just started the conversation with a bit of a teaser saying, what is the vision of Canva? And that's all I'd like to say on that. If you take any questions.
Any questions from you? Okay, hearing none, we'll go to the next item, which is public comments. Do we have any members of public? Can people online comment?
Yes.
Is there anyone online? No. Okay. So we will continue to press ahead. So the next item is 7A, the fall Commonwealth Transition Board meeting. Begin with Ian.
Thank you. So you saw the list that we produced last month. And Paul and Ella suggested one change, which I think is probably a very good one. If you could just scroll down to that table. So the suggestion is that we just amend the one item in that list that I presented last time to just talk about those slots. So the idea is we're trying to get more opportunities to put items in for smart scale. And so the idea here is to try to create the opportunity for FAMPO to have more regional slots to be able to do that. I don't know, the chair, if you'd like to just elaborate on what you're suggesting, because I think that we may want to just add this to our list of items as a, well, sort of a slight amendment, that's all. But it would help us in terms of the slots that we would get if this kind of.
Sure, I would be happy to do that. So basically, as you know, basically with, smart scale, I think been around 3, the state introduced limits on the number of applications that different agencies could have. I'll say basically for most localities in the states, they're limited to 4 applications. And then basically most agencies are also limited to 4. I'll say basically in the case of just kind of FAMPO GWC area, I think that doesn't really represent a true need. I think FAMPO and GWC probably have more than 4 worthy projects to submit for smart scale. And I say basically the state decision on doing that was at a time when basically the funding level was much lower. Before the state General Assembly kind of raised some of the gas taxes there, basically was in the session before last. So there's more funding to go around, but we still have these kind of what I would view as artificially low application limits. So the proposal here is to kind of create a medium category. This would benefit FAMPO and GWC, would also benefit localities that were basically in the middle between 100,000 and 200,000 population. So it would benefit Stafford, Spotsylvania in this region. There would be other kind of counties in the state that would benefit, like Albemarle in the Charlottesville area, Hanover and the Richmond area. I think there's a couple in Northern Virginia and a couple in the Hampton Roads area, as well as I think there's one in Roanoke. And it would benefit a lot of the PDCs statewide, as well as with NPOs would benefit FAMPO. I think it would also maybe benefit Roanoke. So this would kind of lead to kind of a modest increase in the number of basically pre-applications and applications for smart scale, and just to kind of like go over kind of what this table says. So basically right now, if you're a locality and you're basically less than 200,000 population, you get 5 pre-applications and you get 4 final applications. And then if you're over 200,000, you get 12 pre-applications and 10 final applications. And then basically for the regional agencies like FAMPO or GWC or transit agencies, the threshold is 500,000. So if you're above 500,000, you get that greater number of applications. This proposal would set up a middle category, which for the localities would be basically 100,000 to 200,000, and then for the regional agencies, 250,000, 500,000. I know that GWC I think is what, 370,000, something like that.
382,
382, okay.
Yeah.
And what's the population of FAMPO?
327.
Okay. I'm impressed. So, I mean, FAMPO and GWC would be well over those limits, and then that Stafford, I think, is like 154,000, something like that.
156.
And those, what's the population?
135.
So they're both over. So, and that would be the benefit. So this was just a proposal, an idea that would benefit not only our region, but some other areas of the state that are similar to both. Where they're kind of like a medium-sized area. I guess I just wanted to see if the committee had comments, or questions about this, or maybe better ideas.
We're talking about slots, so that's the key thing.
Okay. Question, has it ever been considered to plug into the growth rate from like the Weldon Cooper studies that come out every couple of years versus the population? Because in the localities that are growing faster, there's more of a need for capacity expansion, that kind of thing. I don't know. That's something that's ever been considered. No.
So that could be another suggestion beyond this.
Yeah, feel free to do.
I guess, does the state have any thoughts on this?
Paul, I'm sure you aware, how we wound up where we are. And this discussion, of course, has always played into, how many breakdowns should there be and so on. And I think just in terms of resources, I think that was how this got to this point. But, it certainly makes sense that, the leak shouldn't be from, 4 to 10 days. It doesn't even sound right. I understand, and I think what you're proposing is very reasonable. I don't know where we stand as far as, Michelle, the other thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, like Stephen said, I think when it was initially developed, it was based on resources in different populations around the state. I do know it's every application cycle, more and more localities. I know in the district this time, we're getting localities in the lower end of the district that have not expressed interest. So that is going to be a strain on how Fredericksburg district is able to provide resources. So the more applications we get to VDOT, that might limit how much service we can provide in preparing a number of applications too. There are districts around the state that only help applicants with a small number of their applications. Bristol district, for example, will only help every applicant with 2, no matter how many they can put in. And that's their limit, because they just don't have staff and resources to help anymore. So it's fine to propose different numbers and other things, but the more we get that, even the localities, PDCs, MPOs, might then have to take on more responsibility for preparing those applications.
Does anyone have any additional comments on this?
I mean, I think this is a good proposal. At least it kind of gives us some middle ground. Like Steve said, it's a huge jump to go from 4 to 10, which more than doubles the amount of applications these smaller communities and localities can submit. So I'm all in favor of trying to get some more projects into the system, either by increasing the amount we can submit or reducing the amount some of these large localities can submit. We bring it more close down to 8 instead of 10.
I mean, I don't get a vote, but my initial response to it is it makes sense to have something between that big jump. But also, I mean, it's a proposal, and like all proposals we make to the CTD and to the sector consultation, a portion of them get taken seriously and dealt with, others don't. Sometimes they just spark a thought. So this might be the catalyst to spark a thought that they need to relook at those 4 and 10. And we might end up with a 5 and 7 or 5 and 9 or something. So we might not get exactly what we asked for, but I think it's worth asking because, then at least we can start the conversation and they'll come back with some different arrangement, which is fine. But at least maybe that there's some thought that 4 to 10 jump is a little bit ridiculous. And they put some thought into getting into the deal, which I think it's worthwhile making a recommendation and then seeing what the discussion looks like.
So it sounds like there's consensus in how to the inputs. I guess, do we need to take any action on this?
What I'm going to do is, provided this consensus on it, what I'm going to do is add it to that list and then turn that list into a letter. So that will just say, we'd like to have a meeting section for consultation, and here are the items we'd like to discuss. We are proposing this template. I'm going to ask the policy committee to sign off on that letter at their next meeting if there's general consensus on that item. Then I think we put in the right thing, send it to them, we ask for a meeting, go to a meeting. So whether the whole CTV meetings actually happen or not, we'll still request that meeting with the secretary consultation if we don't. So hopefully that'll get some discussion going.
That's great, thank you, Ian.
So I can proceed.
Yes. So the next item is 7B, the CMAQ program and the SDBG program project selection process update with myself. I know there's a link which does that just kind of explain kind of the details of how CMAQ funding can be used. Okay. So I guess I'll just give kind of like a brief update just on kind of what the process has been doing since the last TAC meeting there at the beginning of October. Also, there was a special subcommittee set up at the last TAC meeting, which just met once. And we basically got a kind of a good start on basically the process. So that everyone was given the opportunity to submit comments to that. So we kind of shared comments, discussed kind of our thoughts on potential changes at the last meeting. We did basically have some common ground on some of the issues, which was good, and also that there is a second meeting set up this Friday at 2 o'clock, and that's virtual, right? So that will kind of continue the discussion. I know the meeting materials for that have gone out. Is there anything I've missed? Okay. So did anyone have any comments or questions at this time for myself or for the staff? Okay, hearing none, we'll go to the next item, which is 7C. This is the Highway Infrastructure Program HIP funding discussion. I'll say that I had asked a question, I think if it was at the last TAC meeting or if it was right after that, but basically was asking the question of what is HIP funding and how can it be spent? And is it really all STBG? And I guess the short answer to that is it basically behaves very similarly to STBG, and basically in terms of the usage here would be the same, and it's basically generated basically by work backwards. So basically using a STBG kind of type methodology on that would make sense. The one item which kind of stood out to me though was that basically the HIP funding has an obligation deadline, I believe that's similar to the STBG.
Yeah, when we got the HIP funds, that's what I advised you, that they are just like you use them as SCBG, but there is a deadline date on there. I have to pull it up on what those were. I think it's in my other book.
It's in the packet.
Is it? I know I
Yeah,
given y'all
so-
the deadline date on those funds.
So you read my mind, that's kind of my next question. So basically with the STB, so with HIP funding, would it make the most sense for FAMPO basically just to kind of swap that out for STBG on kind of existing projects?
It's, yes, because you have to, those funds have to be used. So the HIP funds have a deadline date they have to be obligated by.
Yes.
The STB, I'm just going to say RSVP because I'm so used to saying RSVP.
Oh, that's fine. Yeah, I'll see.
So the problem is that the date,
September 24.
okay,
September 2024.
gotcha. So that was the deadline date for those HIP funds. So, but you just have to also remember, RSVP or STBG, I'm so used to saying it the other way, sorry. They also have to be obligated or put on a project by a certain date too, okay? So that's another thing we can't just have them sitting in previous, anytime. We also have to put them on a project to get those working too. But the HIP funds do have a deadline date, you have to have them put on a project, and we prefer them to be obligated by that too. Okay? So now you can swap them out for STBG, but that does not mean you're gonna be able to just put the STBG in a holding account and wait for something else. Those funds are gonna also have to be probably put on something. Okay?
So do you think, like, I know that the amount of like HIP funding, it's something like 500,000. It's not like a huge amount of funding. Do you think like that VDOT could work with FAMPO staff, maybe just come up with a proposal for how to allocate HIP funding?
Yeah.
Right.
That's easy.
I guess like.
But just remember, we could take the HIP fundings off and we can take the STBG off and replace it with HIP. But they don't want you, it all depends on how old the STBG is. Okay? If it's not in the, I'll say, future years, they're gonna want you to put it on another project that goes forward. So I'm not gonna make any suggestions of moving anything in previous.
Right.
Any suggestions will be coming in future years.
Right.
Because that way you don't get hung up in that, you have previous funding sitting out there, and they're gonna turn around and ask me, you're gonna have to offer.
Right.
Okay? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I believe I'm tracking with you. So just like, to make sure I understand, so let's say, 500,000, if it gets put on kind of STBG eligible projects, that frees up some STBG, but you can't kind of directly take out previous STBG. But that's what so you have to swap other kind of STBG.
You're gonna have, yes, it's gonna have,
Like FY23 STBG coming out.
any sort of STBG in previous cannot go down and sit in your balance entry account.
Right.
They're not gonna allow that, okay? So there lies where you're gonna have to play with the, I don't know, I have to go back, I wasn't expecting you to ask a certain line item on that thing, but if those hit funds have already gone to previous, haven't they? So they're in FY20, so that will be, I can only move those funds to another project or take those out and put in SDVG or return, you know what I'm saying? You can only swap. If you start swapping in previous, you can take it off of a project, the STBG, and put it on there, but those funds that you take off the STBG that you take off in previous, you're gonna have to put somewhere else. So it really doesn't make any sense to move.
On the project.
Right.
So I said, like, from a timing perspective, like, if, example, we're through this in January, at work, with hit funding,
They just put it in. I'm not understanding what you're asking.
so Tampa's not meeting in December, right?
Right.
I'm not sure there's time to do this in November, so basically this action will go through Tampa, basically in
January policy committee.
could that work, basically with kind of allocating hit funding and.
So here's my question is what's, I guess, I wanna know what the problem is that we're trying to solve first. Does that make sense? I don't know what we're trying to solve.
Well, I thought the issue with hit funding had kind of, had to be spent sooner than the SDG, so it made sense.
So, and we haven't put that on a project yet.
Yeah, it's not been put on a project yet.
So we can simply, when we update the, when we go through and update the projects, all of them, we can simply swap those out at that time. And so then what you'll have is, we'll have that line item at the bottom in the 22 and up that we put on a project.
It doesn't seem that there's gonna be any deadline that we're gonna cross before the January policy committee, right?
Right.
So if we can prepare towards that, we can then make an amendment. Also, we're gonna obviously have.
Well, I mean, we're getting ready to go through an update right now, so couldn't we just do it all at one time?
Can't we just do this in?
Yeah, I don't know why we're in the middle of this process. We want to start moving this around. Why don't we just do it all at one time?
Well, that was my question of whether or not, given that the hit had to be spent before the SDG.
We'll take that rule into account when we go through this process of updating that spreadsheet.
There may be one exception, which is not related to VDOT at all, it's related to the East-West study. And that is if we want to bring a consultant in before March, which we would like to do on the phase 2, otherwise it sort of winds down and there's like a lot of nothing happening for a while. We may have to ask for funding for a portion of the East-West study remainder. We've started to talk to consultants about a kind of ballpark figure of what the phase 2 would cost. It's where all the engineering happens, and where all the drawings have to happen, and where all the roadway stuff has to happen. And we were allocated that 125, and we got for the transit portion, 40,000 from the 5307. But it looks like the cost is going to be upwards of $250,000 to $350,000 in the end. So that means that there's going to be a gap. We would prefer not, I would prefer, we can actually discuss the detail with staff, but I would prefer not to wait until we get to March or April to sign up the consultant on the project to issue the task order. So we may need to come back and request a one-off for an amount, and I don't have an exact amount for you because we're trying to get those two consultants' quotes to be kind of a little bit closer together. They're quite far apart right now. So we need to refine what we're asking for in the scope until we kind of get a good sense that this is what we really need and this is kind of a reasonable cost, and then we'll go up for a task order. So that one item, we might come back and ask for funding, either from HIP funding or SC, whatever, whatever specific about where the funding comes from. But we may request that from staff to be able to complete that project, because I don't want to issue any task orders for money that I don't, because that's just, you can't do that.
So you're gonna more than likely bring it up to be approved before March.
Before March.
So then that will, you know, you could then look at using either or funds.
Yeah.
So, and if that's the case, we can always switch out that type of funding at that time.
Yeah.
So you might, I mean, that might be something to go ahead and ask for, you know, approval for. So when we, you know, we start looking at, y'all entire spreadsheet, we have everything to put on there.
Yeah, so I'm gonna try to get a more refined cost to bring back to you all so that you can see and what the stuff would look like. I think I sent a draft to the three reps from the three jurisdictions, just so you know what it generally is about. But we're refining it a little so that we can get a very specific scope and a very specific ballpark initially until we've got a proper task order. But I can refine the ballpark so that it's a little bit more clear what's included and not included, so that when we ask, it's not a vague, give us money, but it's very tight as to the scope and as to the range of what we think the task order is going to cost, so that before we do anything.
Okay.
So I guess if we were to kind of discuss that, when could we begin that process?
Well, I've got the initial documents from both of them, and I want to go through one more round of refinement, so I could probably come back by November with the ballpark figure, with quite a detailed scope before I design the task order. So I can give you the ballpark definitely by November, and then work with the consultants around designing the type of task order.
So I guess, I mean, is that an item we could discuss at the December 10th?
Yeah.
And then maybe it could be an action item in January?
Yeah. I think that would work.
Yeah, and then, then you can, that way the project will be approved, and you can just go ahead and add it to your spreadsheet, and that'll help us sort out your funding.
That sounds good to me. Did anyone have any comments? All right, so that concludes 7C, so we're on to 7D. The Transportation Improvement Program update with Jordan Chandler, and I guess also VDOT.
Yeah, so I'll start off with the ones that are on the agenda and then work through the new ones that Stephen mentioned earlier. So the first one is UPC 113538, which is the FAMPO LRTP support. This is just an update that was requested from VDOT on October 12th. And there's a modification in the FY21 funding amount. This does not reflect the live or real-time funding available. For this adjustment, no air quality conformity is needed, and this adjustment was handled by staff, so there's no action required. The next adjustment, maybe you can skip to the next, is from DRPT. It's their funding table C. So after the FRED addition of the FRED project was added from FAMPO Resolution 22-01, the FDA approved this, and then DRPT sent back the updated funding table. Again, no air quality conformity was needed, and this is adjustment that staff handled and updated. So the next one, these are attached to your packet and agenda, is UPC 110382. This is again just a debt service, and this is updating funding amounts from federal AC conversion dollars from FY22 through 24 with interest on the project. And then no air quality conformity needed, and then this is adjustment handled by staff again. And then the last one, which does need action, is UPC 119112, again, the smart scale project from this last round 4. So VDOT requested this again, and there is going to be a public comment period and public hearing required, and this funding will be used for the PE phase of the project. In addition, no air quality is required for the TIP project because this project is going through air quality with the LRTP process. So it's currently underway through air quality. And I'll turn it over to Adam to give a little bit more about the public comment period and the options that we're trying to find to get that approved.
Yeah, thanks, Jordan. Just as far as adding this project to, since it's not in the existing tip, but add a project, we do have to do a public comment period. Famco's public participation plan does allow for tip amendments to a 15-day public comment period. So our working proposal right now to our board on the 15th of November is to have them initiate a 15-day public comment period on the next day, the 16th, and then authorize the TAC at its December meeting to approve that amendment. So then VDOT will have what they need by December 6th. We can check those boxes and, start to draw down funds at that point. So unless there's any objection to that proposal from the TAC, that's what our plan is of the staff.
So that sounds reasonable to me. Did anyone else have any comments?
So, I got an answer back from the office on the additional project. And this is Kim Pryor, she's the lady who talked to you, she says, that until the December CTV meeting, when the CTV approves those amendments of the projects to the 6-year improvement plan, we can't do anything. Okay? So we're just gonna have to wait.
So, no,
Because I mean, yeah,
that's to do it in January or something.
yeah, we'll see what happens. They'll approve that and then we'll move forward with that process. But I'll try to get them to group them all together. If there's any more coming in, if we have to have a comment period, we'll have to do it.
That's what we were aiming for, to try to get as many to.
Right.
So we can do one.
Right. But we can't, those projects are not in the 6-year improvement plan until the CTV approves them.
And my proposal is we do this one now, because we have it. And then all
Yeah, because that one's scheduled to go
the others in January.
December 21st.
Sounds reasonable, definitely be that.
Yeah, we're gonna, because this one we need is have a start date of December 21st. And then the other ones will not have, will have a later start date because of that.
With the other ones, Susan, that are going to be funded, are likely going to be funded from Smart Hill Round 4. Would those projects trigger conformity that we have to rerun again?
I'm gonna have to check all those to see, because where I'm not, really not, what's happening is we're not really getting, we're not seeing the funds move in the system. We're just opening the project up and we start charging to it. So therein lies, it's a little bit harder for me to answer questions for you because I'm not seeing where they're moving money. This is all being done as, it's sort of kind of like we're taking a loan out of the project. We're gonna go start spending money on the project, but we don't actually have the money. And so what'll happen is we actually, the funds will be showing up in the later years. So that's my best way to try to describe it, as is, I know you're looking, because, I'm trying to say this, look at the project as a whole. The money is on the project is in the outer year, okay? But Mr. Bank over here has money that can help us pay the bills until we get them. So we're actually like taking a loan out of the project. Does that make sense?
When are we actually gonna start construction on those?
Well, that would be a new schedule they'll have to come up with, but we're talking PEs are gonna be starting much earlier. I mean, as in probably what, the next 3 to 6 months?
Yeah, the PE will start in the next 3 to 6 months. So, new construction schedule.
So in order to do the PEs, we've got to get this process.
Correct.
We can start spending on the thing before the money's arrived.
Right.
So this is just a question, I know like we had this issue with some spontaneous projects. I think last year, basically, they were not in the CLRP, but they were advancing because of the VA. They were temporarily put in just PE7.
Correct.
After a time. Assuming with like, smart scale round 5, it'll probably be something that triggers conformity. So I guess is there an option maybe if basically one of these two projects would trigger conformity, just kind of add it for PE study for now? And
Well, I mean, the projects are known. I mean, they were already put out there.
Yes.
The two projects, so I mean,
Problem is, do they trigger conformity or not? And if they do, how do we handle it?
Right,
Both the projects are in our approved CLRP.
that's what I was thinking.
Right, but they're not in the tip. So if they need to be.
Correct, so that's where my issue is that's, and we can't put them in the tip or the stip until they get into the 6-year plan.
So just hang on a second, did they go through conformity to get into the CLRP?
That's happening right
Yeah,
So we don't need to then
right,
theoretically trigger a second conformity analysis because it's been done. But we do need to do the administrative side of getting them into the tip.
correct, and we can't do that until they're in the 6-year plan.
Okay, but I'm right on that, right? So, Paul, I think that saves us a problem in terms of conformity.
Yeah, it sounds like if they're in the CRP, you'd be.
You already, yeah, you've gone through that.
So we've done the conformity. So all we need to do is the administrative side, which is less of it.
There we go.
So
And like I said, do you think this is crazy? This is just a couple projects I'm doing,
I get it,
a dozen over there, so.
I get it. Well, we have to do public participation on that.
now. Yes.
Yeah, so it just requires public participation, but that we
Right.
can handle in.
Right, and so, but like I said, December they'll approve, and then we can, I guess we can get a tip amendment at that time, if that's when they're gonna fund it. So this is, just remember, this is smart scale round 4,
That's fine.
and they're getting the money, but I have not heard if they're gonna include that in part of the advancing project.
We'll ask for the policy committee to
So,
authorize us to do the whole thing.
right, so we'll see better that if they're just gonna get the money in the outer years, or if they're gonna get the money in the outer years and they're gonna want us to accelerate at the same time.
I think we should be good though. Sounds like we can do it all in January.
Okay.
This one will do now.
So we do, Mr. Chair, need action on 119, 112 to advertise a public comment period starting November 16th for that project to run 15 days.
Did you guys have anything else to say kind of on the two? All right, so what's the action we need?
We recommend a public comment period for the policy committee for 119, 112. So we're on 15 days and then subsequently be approved by the TAC on December the 6th.
I'll make a motion.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. All right, so that concludes 7D.
Great.
The next item is 7E, that's the 2015 long-range transition plan with Adam and Jordan.
Great, thank you, Mr. Chair. We have a few updates related to the long-range plan. We're making a lot of progress on that right now. We are still looking at early 2022 for having the plan completed and going out for public comment. We should have something ready to distribute to the TAC at some point in December, date to be determined. The first item we have for you today is the approval of Resolution 2212, which is approving the conformity report. This is what has been going through the process, started with the ICG meeting back in September, or October rather. And we are seeking approval of the reports for submission to FHWA and FTA. We'll note that there's one exception, and we are looking to amend the terminus for the Dixon Street Tidewater Trail widening project. So going back to the summer when we updated the 2045 list to get to 2050, we said the starting point for the 2050 list was the working 2045 list that has been amended each of the last 2 years. So we didn't want to reinvent the wheel, so we're going to start there. When we added the results of the round 4 smart scale funded projects, we inadvertently cut off the terminus that was in Spotsylvania County for this project. So it was an error. We are looking to go back and correct that as part of this conformity process so that we don't have to do another 3-month conformity process to change the project terminus. So we are looking via this resolution to capture that correction as part of this process. The details of that map, you can pull up that next tab. Went out to the ICG for review a couple weeks ago from Jim Ponticello. So this hasn't, the details, Matt, you can scroll down to the table of what we're looking to change. So all we're doing is changing the terminus from the city line, US 17 Mills Drive, Spotsylvania. So are there any questions on that before we ask for approval?
Good. I'll make a motion to approve. Is there a second? Second. All in favor? Aye.
The second item we have a quick update on is we've been working with Cambridge over the last couple months to work on the system performance report. So So this is the part of the long-range plan under the federal regs. NPOs are required to report on the performance of the different federal measures as part of the performance-based planning programming process under the FAST Act. So we have all of the metrics except for some of the 2020 safety data for the state and the Pampa region. But Matthew, if you can just scroll through this to give everyone an idea of what's in here. Again, this looks at all the federal measures, safety, congestion, system reliability, those sorts of things. So we look at the targets that were adopted over time over the last 3 or 4 years and how the region and the state are doing with those targets. So again, this is just sort of a snapshot of here's where we're at a point in time. And this will be an appendix in the LRTP. Happy to take any questions on this.
What we think maybe systematic today. Modeling.
All right, hearing none, we'll turn it over to Jordan to talk about the environmental justice.
So as part of the long-range plan process, we're doing environmental justice analysis. If you want to go to the next slide. An environmental justice analysis is required by an executive order. So in turn, this is a federal requirement. DOT, FHWA, and FTA all have guiding principles as what the best approach is to do this process in a sense with the benefits and burdens analysis that is required. So like I said, MPOs are required to do a benefit and burden analysis to see if there's any disproportionate burden on historically underserved communities. If you go to the next slide. The data specifics that we use, so we use 7 historically underserved population groups. 2 of them are required to do the environmental justice analysis, which is EJ, which is minority and low income. But best practices include several other historically underserved groups. So we've included those in our analysis. We use American Community Survey 5-year estimates from 2019, and also at the block level geographically. Staff agreed that using a standard deviation was the most appropriate method to analyze a focus group. So standard deviation just measures the spread of the data. And so we said that with 1 standard deviation above the mean, that is appropriate assessment for the region. Because if we don't do anything above the mean, we have a majority of the region, like over 95% of the region highlighted as a focus area. And that doesn't really focus what we're supposed to assess. That's looking at the entire region, whereas this gives us about 40% of the region highlighted as focus areas. So on the next slide, this is the assessment for each of the 7 groups. So the first one is racial minority. At the bottom, you can see the percentage that's used as the region, 1 standard deviation above the mean. So the dark gray areas are the focus areas. Next slide. So again, for ethnic minority, Hispanic or Latino, and you can just slowly go through. The next is low income households, limited English proficiency households, 0 car households, older adults, the population over 65, and then persons with disabilities over the age of 18. So then staff compiled all of our long-range transportation projects, the roadway, active transportation, transit, and TDM. We did not include the PE or studies in this process. And when we're assessing this, we wanted to get a regional view because that's what we do at the MPO. So we did not consider or look at any local comprehensive plan projects. So there may be projects that we don't look at in our assessment that are actually happening in the region. So we just wanted to note that as we're going through the process. So these are the active transportation projects, highway projects, and then the transit and TDM projects. So back to this benefit and burden assessment, staff looked at what the FHWA and FTA defined as a benefit or a burden and assessed in the way that we could by each mode. But due to staff limitations, we don't have the ability to determine every benefit and burden, things like air quality and sound vibrations. We don't do that. That is done through the NEPA process, which is a project level process, and we just do the regional process. So there's the benefits and burdens by each mode. And then this is sort of what we would look at to visualize the assessment. So we look at the focus areas. This is for racial minority and non-white, and then the transit and TDM project overlaid on that spatial analysis. And so the next step, we're doing an internal review of the document currently, And this again is going to be part of the overall 2050 LRTP process, and it's going to be seen in the appendices. And then this data will also be used in the FAMPO SEEP as an appendix and to assess where we should focus our outreach on. And if we need any sort of translation, I'm working with Stacy to get language data and who speaks which languages to how we should translate our documents. So I can take any questions on the problem.
Chair, if I can just add one thing. The reason for using the one standard deviation, which Dawn just explained, is because if you try to use other metrics, we model what the outcome would look like if we used other metrics. And the other metrics all give you too much and covers the whole region, or too little and it covers almost nothing. So the metric, after playing around with this, Jordan did multiple iterations of this thing. After playing around with this for a while, the one that makes the most sense, that gives you what you want, which is really where the problem, where the infrastructure would impact communities that are most affected and where the needs are. This one standard deviation is the best fit. It just gives you not nothing and not everything. It gives you what you're looking for in the middle, which I think is the best assessment. A standard deviation might be difficult to explain to people who don't do statistics, but it is the best fit for the problem.
Mr. Chair.
So I just want to thank staff for their work on this. I just want to briefly say that basically there's a lot of work that goes into this, satisfy federal requirements, kind of on the last item and this item as well as the CMP, and I just want to thank staff for that. Yes, Jim.
The only question I had was, I know you use the standard deviation, and I was looking at that. I don't remember that as part of like the Title VI plan, which I can't remember if FAMPO follows the GWRC one or vice versa. But just making sure that if that is utilized, because it sounds like you're doing more than what's required, that y'all properly document that and why you did it. Because if not, you're not following your own standard, which you can't do either.
Right.
So that would just be my only comment. It's of course okay to do more, but then explaining why and also being consistent, because a lot of this stuff I don't recall seeing before as far as the approach, and it doesn't match with the standard that is. That's my only comment.
Yeah, I can definitely talk with Stacy and make sure that it's consistent. And then, like you said, with the approach and the standard, there's not really a set standard of how you should do this. Every NPO does this differently. So we're taking kind of looking at the region best practices, advice from Stacy to not discriminate anyway, to just kind of compile what we think is the best. And it's not prescribed in any way. And they're working on doing that now through a lot of the executive orders that have been passed recently. They're working to have a step-by-step methodology that is consistent.
So you're not following Stacy's process, then you're creating your own for this.
Yeah,
They
this
should
this
be
sort
more
of, yeah, they're one and the same. They operate sort of under the same umbrella. We combined our public participation Title VI plans into this community engagement equity plan, and to approve that in May.
Right.
June.
That's our.
This comes right out of that. So the population types that we look at in here exactly match the population types we looked at in 2045 long-range plan as well.
Yeah, just the only piece that you had just mentioned, if you're following what Stacy has, then you do have a standard for what you're able to do for your evaluation, which is at the 1.5 standard deviation. So again, I don't have any issue with it. I think y'all probably did the right way, but if you're mirroring what the federal requirement is, you do have it outlined. There is Stacy, her presentation that set the standard. So we just need to make sure that if we're doing more, because you can't find the populations that are impacted, that you document it that way, because yeah, we can't change it, which she's outlined, if that's what y'all are using.
Yeah, we can take a look at that and get with Stacy, and you can send me an email, Jamie, and let you know where we sort of have that tied up.
Yeah, and then this will definitely be like at least a 30-page document in the LRT as well. That will have specific methodologies, and then we'll make sure to compare with Stacy's notes too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, we'll take it.
The final update that we have related to the long-range plan for today is with the congestion management process. So this is the item that Matthew has developed over the last couple of months, a performance monitoring program. So you've seen that. It's also in today's packet under staff reports, but the actual document itself is last Was last updated by FAMPO in 2019. We have some minor updates that we're looking to make this fall, sort of into December, into a 2021 iteration. So next slide. Just talk a little bit about the purpose of the document, which I think most everybody is aware of at this point. The purpose and scope of the update and some adjustments we're looking to make to the CMP corridors. The CMP is a federally required document. You can see there sort of generally what the CMP accomplishes. We have to have one as FAMPO, even though the Fredericksburg urbanized area is not a TMA. The Washington, D.C. urbanized area is part of that in Stafford County. The agreement that we have, the MOU with the Transportation Planning Board in Washington, D.C. for that urbanized area says that we do this. So that's why we have to do it. And then again, we have a link to the federal regs in our packet. Under our FY22 UPWP, we have a planning activity to update the CMP to align with the 2050 long range plan. Again, this builds on work that we did most recently in March of 2019. There's 3 performance measures that we look at for each of our CMP corridors and sub-corridors. We look at travel time index. So 1 would sort of be a normal travel time. So if you see something larger than a 1, it's taking too long. If it's less than a 1, traffic is moving a little bit better than it normally does. Volume to capacity ratio. So based on the functional classification of that roadway, looking at the AADT of that segment over different time periods to assess whether the capacity is sufficient to meet the existing volume for that roadway, and then the crash rate. So we're currently developing a tool based on FHWA guidance to look at crash rate and assess that by each of our corridors. The purpose and scope, again, is this. We are narrowing the scope of this under the recommendations that came out of the FHWA FTA certification review for the TPP in 2019 to look at just the FAMPO area rather than Planning District 16. The federal regs are that we only have to do this for the TMA that's in Northern Stafford. FAMPO decided back in 2019 that it was wise to do a broader assessment, partly because we might become a TMA. And it's just good to have this data for other parts of the region as well. There's a couple updates on the data specifics. We're using more granular level segments to assess the different measures for travel time index. So we're moving from the TMC data, which are sort of longer segments, to the XD data, which is a new thing that we actually have now for Route 610. So historically, FAMPO didn't have access to some of this data that we now have. Again, the proposed adjustment to the corridors that we'll look at on the next 2 slides. We're going to have this wrapped up again for conclusion as a part of the broader 2050 long range plan update in late December. As far as the CMP corridors, currently in the CMP, we have Interstate 95, Route 1, 610 in Stafford County, 17, Route 3 and Route 2. We are proposing to add Lafayette Boulevard in the city in Spotsylvania County, Route 218 in Stafford County. That would also include Warrenton Road in between routes 1 and 95, and then Route 208 in Spotsylvania County. And on the next slide, we have sort of the basis for this proposal. We think that limiting the scope of the overall plan to the FAMPO area and not including King George and Caroline County now, there's some room to sort of expand what we currently have. All of these roadways are at the minor arterial level. They support movement through the region and provide primary access to neighboring localities. So we think that they meet a high enough threshold to be included as a part of FAMPO's CMP. This is what we're taking to you guys as the TAC today to discuss, and we'd like to see whether you concur with our proposal or have any questions or comments.
Thank you, Adam. I'll just say that we're supportive of the changes in Spotsylvania.
Bob, do you have any comments on the city from any of those corridors? Are we good? We're good.
I think so.
I wanted to ask maybe about Paul had Avenue, consider the functional classification change or something.
Fall Hill Avenue, he suggested.
Fall Hill is a major collector road, and I don't believe there's any other major collectors that we include as a part of the CMP.
These are also, these are also roads that from time to time are subject to. So this is a congestion management process. So I would support the proposal from the team as well, because we do want to
So one comment on the functional classification, I believe that that process will be done in the next couple of years. When I beat out, if you know the exact timing for that, I think like 2024.
Oh, that's not.
But I'll say whenever that is, basically if there was like a road that we felt like we should be changed, like in Fall River, for example, that would be the time to change it. Any other comments?
Mr. Chair, I just had a quick question. I was just, digesting this, and the EJ conversation was interesting. And to piggyback on Jamie's point, I was just curious if staff could provide what the distribution was reflected in some of the metrics that you guys originally sampled. That would be just good to see. I understand it can be difficult to get those concentrations at the census block level, but if you've got an EJ dispersion, if you will, that's relevant and geographically, undefined per se, or dispersed, for lack of a better term, then perhaps, in terms of long-range planning, investments on a practical level with that kind of strategy, maybe, better, simply speaking. So
Yeah, we're happy to provide that, Brendan. All of the data and maps that Jordan showed we're happy to share on the website. We also have a histogram that shows that distribution by population type, so looking at the average and how it sort of plays out over the course of all the block groups in the region.
it'd be great to see that.
Yeah. I think,
And are you guys in the final product? I know you guys work on this, and it's gonna be a draft coming out. We're gonna take a look at it. Are you guys like the PDPP? Or is that gonna be? It's just gonna be an appendice. It's not gonna be a single section.
The system performance report, we look at and talk about some of the targets, some of the performance data throughout the plan. But the primary place where we're addressing the specific federal regs is in the system performance report. So that's a standalone appendix.
And are you guys gonna highlight perhaps like the trends in terms of the targets?
That's exactly what's in there. So it looks at for some measures, 2017 to 2020, some 2018 to 2020.
And those are gonna be those exclusively in the appendix and not a separate highlights portion in this PLRB?
Correct.
And EJ stuff too, that's all gonna be tucked away in the back, or are you gonna pull out trends?
That will be its own assessment that serves as an appendix to the plan.
Very good.
Yeah, so we have probably, Brandon, 10 appendices. They're
Yeah.
all referenced at different points throughout the mainline document, if you will. But we think that what we've identified to be placed as appendices need to operate as a standalone document as well.
Okay.
Same with the transportation plan, it's all separate. It's technically part of the RTP, but it's a separate appendix, and then we refer to it in the text of the chapters as we go through. We're busy writing the chapters now, we've got a bunch done already. And so we say, look for this in the appendix, or refer to chapter 2 for the chart. And so we kind of bind it all together in the text.
Sure.
But yeah, it's also useful to do that because you can take the attachment as an appendix and share it with somebody without having to share this several hundred page document.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing it.
So each of these appendices, you can take them and say, here's the one on EJ, here's the one on transportation, here's the one, so it's easier to share.
Absolutely.
Very good. Thank you very much.
Ian, do you want to take staff reports, or do you want me to do that now?
Go ahead. You're up
Is
there.
there any correspondence first, though?
No.
Staff reports.
We do have a handful of staff reports today. These are items that weren't quite high enough to get on the agenda for discussion, but we're happy to discuss any if need be. The first is a October CTB meeting recap. There's a couple things we wanted to bring to the attention of the TAC. The first is there are proposed changes now to the Smart Scale Technical Guide for round 5. We've included a link in there. There's primarily 2 overarching changes. One is how they're measuring the environmental quality. Tell me out, Matthew, what specifically are they doing there?
The non-SOV users,
Yes.
how they calculate non-SOV currently, they just multiply everything by the total SOV, and instead they're proposing to multiply it by just each SOV category, as well as a quantitative change to how they do air quality calculations.
Right, thank you, Matthew. And in this link, they actually use Lafayette Boulevard, the project from round 4, as a case study to say, here's what we changed. So it's pretty interesting for us. There's also additional revenues that were presented by NetDOT and you at the CTB meeting that they're looking to use via the district grant program funding breakdown where they look at each of the construction districts across the Commonwealth and fund additional projects. They've selected 2 that are in the Fanpro region, the US Route 1 STARS and Route 3 off-ramp in the city, and then Onville Road improvement in Stafford County. So if you have not seen that yet, they're letting you know that that's what's being proposed. And they are looking for action by the CTB in December because the dollars have to be on projects by the end of 2021.
The point is that we're probably getting another 2 projects funded that we weren't going to get funded, right? So those are your 2, one in Stafford, one in the city.
Just to let y'all know, that was based upon strictly going down the score.
Yeah.
Okay, that was not random picks or anything like that. We had a dollar amount to use and we went straight down.
Was the next 3 in line?
It was that correct. So that's how that was the logic we used to pick the project.
I guess I have one question with Unbill, like, does that assume the money that Fanpro allocated to Unbill last spring? Or was that?
Whatever was in the project, what was ever in the application is what was funded, that was funded. So if that was on the application, then that would be correct.
So would that then potentially free up the additional money that basically was put on Unbill that was STBG and CMAQ?
If the STB and CMAQ was in the application, it will have to state it.
Yeah, this is basically subsequent issue that Fanpro took, I think, last May. So it was after Smart Scope number 4.
And then that would be, then yes, we are funding only what was in the application.
Let's check the numbers and we'll get to the email on one.
Well, and just a quick thing though, even if it is funded separately or funded 2 ways, we still have to go through the process of where those funds are today, because based on even some of the stuff we did last week, if they're still funding assigned and they needed more money for that project, they'd still have basically that first right of refusal for the dollars. So that's maybe something we need to discuss, but if it's funded in 2 places and they're short $100,000, you go back into the pot. So to my knowledge, based on what we've been saying on other items,
So this is good news, just something to check on, and maybe we can talk about it briefly, maybe in December.
Yeah, I think we can just get the numbers for you so that when we talk, we have the actual numbers up. I find it a little difficult to discuss when the numbers are not right in front of us, and then we actually make a mistake, and then we have to redo it. Just put the numbers up in the next meeting and request, and then you'll know the rest.
yeah, it's not my project, but good luck to you.
Let's wait to see if CTV approves. We'll talk about taking money off.
Exactly, so that's why, let's push it to December, and we can just put it all on the screen.
When is the CTB meeting? December.
I don't know if they have a date yet. It's usually between the 18th and 22nd, give or take.
So they're actually probably going to meet after next tax. It's really maybe it's the January.
Yeah. Anyway, we'll keep an eye on it, and don't worry, we will, if we find extra money lying around, Susan knows already interacting here about some of the projects that we currently have. We want to know how much we left over.
I know, I'm gonna get all that to you now.
She's going to be impressed by me a little bit more to get those numbers. We're looking for extra money, don't worry.
How much,
That's
7 to 8?
7 to 8.
Yeah, that's what it is.
7th of December.
Right.
Okay, well, that's a very rich.
That's still right after an expect meeting, but that's.
I mean, I don't doubt, I will see them approving.
Yeah, I think that's.
I don't see them not approving. So if that is something you want to include on the December tax, it would be fine. But, because I do believe it's going to get approved.
We're not gonna actually allocate money to new projects anyway until the new year, new calendar year. So, I mean, it's just like the nature of the stage, and then when we have a fall for projects, we will know how much money we have available to.
The next item we have here is the quarterly report for the CMP Performance Monitoring Program that is now available on the Canva website. We will have a narrative report to accompany that starting in January. The third item is the FY22 safety targets. Again, going back to the performance-based planning program requirements for NPOs, we have to adopt safety targets by February 2022. VDOT has distributed a workbook basically that has all of the data and how they develop the statewide target. NPOs are allowed to develop their own NPO regional target. So we're working through that now. If you're interested in looking at that data with us, let me know. We're happy to have that conversation, but we will most likely adopt the statewide target as has been done at Tamco for the previous 4 years. Number 4, the Virginia Transit Equity and Monetization Study. I believe Sarah Williams mentioned this at the TAC meeting either last month or the month prior. That is underway right now. We just want to keep everybody aware of that, the progress that study is making. There's a link to the study website in our packet. Number 5, Smart Scale Round 5, the economic development sites. Matthew, do you want to talk about this for a second?
Yeah, so we're going to be starting to take a look at what economic development information we need for our applications. So as noted in here, sooner rather than later, we will be making a request for more information. So please start working with your respective planning staffs to get that information that's needed for the projects.
And then lastly, number 6, this is kind of the longest item, but at a high level, if you have not had a chance to read this yet, we have a document that's been produced by Tamco GWRC. There's been 2 iterations of it, one in 2018, one in 2020, to support smart scale projects on checking the box in the scoring process that says, is a project referenced in a regional economic development plan? What the round 3 technical guidance updated was they said, and if you can scroll down just a little bit, that if you have a local comprehensive plan or a local economic development strategy that a project is referenced in, it gets the points. So you don't have to have the addition of a regional document. So we have one that's current as of 2020. But essentially what we're doing here is laying out our basis for not proposing to update that document. So if you scroll down just a little bit further, Matthew, we've looked at the current kind of working universe of round 5 applications in the FAMFO and GWRC area, and 8 of the 32 are not directly referenced in one of those 3 places. And so given that that's a relatively low number, we're not proposing to update this document to include those 8 and issue a task order to the consultant to update that document. So this table just sort of summarizes what projects are on the list as of right now, whether they're in a local comp plan and a local economic development strategy, in our most recent 2020 regional economic development strategy, and whether they're in at least one. So you can see which projects are referenced directly, so you can check that box and get the half point in Smart Scale or not. Again, that's a very high level sort of picture of where we're at. There's more information in the packet, but we are not proposing to update that document. Happy to discuss or take questions on that.
So just so that you understand, if we update that document, we need a consultant to do it. We need in the LRTP, the East-West study, and a bunch of other things that start running at present. This document was used to support the smart scale applications last time because there were a number of applications which were not referenced in comp plans or in local economic development plans of the counties or the city. So the question that we posed ourselves is, do we need to get a consultant to update this document, which will involve spending money that we could allocate to other projects? Or are we fairly happy that we're covered by the plans that we have? And I sent Matthew the task to go and find all of the comp plans and find all of these items and marry them and check, and he's produced a table. So if you want to ask in detail, Matthew has got the detail from having done this. But the question is, do we want to spend the money hiring a consultant to update this document to support our small scale applications? Or do we feel that they are covered by local comp plans, the local economic development documents that you have? Because those are the 2 options. We either update the GWRC document, which will cost us some money, or we go with what we have in terms of supporting the smart scale applications. And they get that 0.5 half a point additional to the score if you reference it in one of those places. You don't have to reference it in multiple places. If it's referenced in one of those, you get the point. You don't have to have it in 4 different places. So it only helps if you not reference it in any of the documents, then this would be the solution, to have this document which would reference that project.
And I would think, and I just think that in terms of the other option would be, say, Alex, noted that Centerport, one wasn't in there, that they could locally and still,
yeah, you could add it to one of your local documents and say it's referencing our local document and then solve that problem. So if anybody feels strongly that we should take action to update the document to reference those that are not carefully referenced in your documents, now would be the time to tell us.
So I'll just make a comment that basically when kind of FAMPO developed this from GWC, at that time there wasn't the provision in Smart Scale that this capabilities in the comp plan, you got the extra points. So one time, I forget maybe rounds 1 through 3, it was very exploited to do this. But I agree with Ian now that it's probably just more expedient just for localities with projects to add them into their comp plan and get a single credit.
Right.
We try not to waste money. We try to, if we need to spend the money, we'll need to, but I'm not one of those people who thinks hiring a consultant for everything is a useful idea. I think that where we need it, and we really need it on modeling, on engineering, on drawings that need to be done, engineering drawings, and all that kind of thing, spend the money because we don't have the capacity in-house. But if we don't need to, so if somebody feels strongly, we'll do it, but not. Any other?
Mr. Chair, I just wanted to ask real quick before we go. Because the MPO has kind of the flexibility to establish, we're talking about PDPP safety targets. Just want to throw out a conversation perhaps to be entertained in the future about coming to a regional consensus in having safety targets that are lower than the state standards, just to continue to invest in, the statewide goal as well as regional activity that takes place and lowering fatalities, injuries, and I don't know, property damage only is one of them, but that's potentially the role of the regional contributors to the MPO, and we could collectively determine that safety targets could be decreased and periodically regroup and evaluate what localities they're doing to ensure that they meet those safety targets. I just want to throw that out, Mr. Chair, as a topic of conversation that could potentially be on a future agenda, whether that's not necessarily in the future, but I do know that's been done at the MPO level in other regions and is something that is helpful towards reducing, serious injury and fatality, in a contribution towards, meeting safety targets.
That's not something which we are kind of discussing in the subcommittee.
So this is basically relative to the performance-based planning program. It's not the CNAC.
Yeah.
Randy, we're happy to share there's a workbook that has all of the data that is sort of the state saying, here's why we're suggesting this.
Right.
But here's all the MPO data. Should you want to make your own, I'm happy to look at that with you. Have a conversation about whether we should adopt something different than the state target. Sure.
Absolutely. If there was a decision to come from that, let it be a collective consensus-based decision. It may spark some activity behind aggressively addressing safety in the region.
Sure, let's chat, and again, this has to be approved by the board by February, so we can potentially bring this back in January for discussion after you and I chat.
Sounds great.
That's great. Thank you, Adam. All right, so we're to member reports. I guess we start my lap with the.
Oh my God, you started that first. I mean, privilege, boss. I feel privileged from you. I got covered enough. I don't know, other than almost take out my money. I have nothing, we're just waiting for a couple items to be approved, and as soon as we got it all, we'll be letting everybody know. Okay?
Okay. Michelle, welcome back. Any updates?
There may be a few other projects that will be advancing.
Right.
There's some other PE starts that the department wants to advance, which is good news. We will have that list shortly, and then we'll likely need some tip actions once they're added to the plan.
Is that something that can wait to January?
Yes.
Okay, great. Steven?
Oh, yeah, last section, VDOT district planning, yes, currently has a job announcement for planning specialist 3. That closes next Wednesday. If you want to know more about it, go to ndot.org/jobs and you can look at it and get any questions on that. So
Is that a new position?
it's a position we've been
for 2 years.
Okay.
You wrote Jake when he,
Right. Okay.
In request.
they request by the job.
All right, now.
Good luck with that. All right, sorry.
Yeah, sure. So yesterday we had a fare-free service for Election Day. We also just recently, probably heard, we recently started having service on some of our routes, including also one route where we extended a little later in the night, 1 hour, so we could match up our transfer times with staff. We just, the period for our proposals for the TSP just ended. So staff is doing internal review of that now. We expect to get that ball rolling here shortly. And that's about all I have right now. Just thanks for everybody's support, and yeah, there'll be more exciting services coming in the future.
Jamie, is there anything you wanted to add?
Nope.
Okay. Good, we'll go to Stafford.
Nothing much to report from Stafford. We did submit our projects for transportation alternatives and revenue sharing, so I hope we get some money from those two. But other than that, just kind of see what happens. Maybe we'll get some money for Onville too.
Yeah, great. We'll go to the city.
I don't have any update.
If I could just mention one thing, we are discussing with the city, the Smart Hill application for this new round on the BCR trail. The two bridges have not been designed, engineered, there's no PE with on them. And so that particular BCR trail application is a little kind of weak in the sense that it doesn't have metrics to it. We discussed with VDOT, we discussed with the city. There was $75,000 put on a PE study to just do that, to do the initial work on those two bridges, which was never spent. And so we're in discussions with the city to see whether between us we can get a consultant to just do some preliminary work on that so that it adds to the please give us the money to fund this VCR trail project, right? So we are in discussions on that. We haven't finalized exactly practically who's got an on-call consultant and how practically to go about it, but we are just, I thought we should have said that due to the fact that the money was previously already allocated. It's not new money, but we do want to come with that.
Thanks a lot, Ian.
There's something wrong.
She's like, thank you, the friend bus just ran over me.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate everything you do to make my job easier. My job.
There's something wrong.
It's okay, we'll talk offline.
I feel like I really like this political thunder.
Okay, thank you. So I guess we'll go to GWC.
Hey, I think our biggest update is that CHIP is here. It is officially the second day of work since we were closed yesterday. Otherwise, I think things are going really well with Geodrive Next. We actually have a meeting with our consultants for marketing this afternoon. So we're starting to get prepared for a return to shared rides. I don't think we're quite there yet, but we're kind of watching when the federal agencies will be going back to work, and we'll try to align our services with that. We're also hoping to launch a new ride sharing app in the next few months. So we're working with the state on that, kind of on their timeline, but we'll share more when we get to that.
That's great.
Yeah, thank you.
Welcome, Chip.
Thank you.
I guess we'll go to VRE.
Just one update from VRE. We're in the very beginning phases of updating our system plan, which is the current horizon year was 2040. So I think we're going to look to extend that out another 10 years or so. We're kind of in the beginning phases of looking at procuring some streetlight software or streetlight data to inform a more regional, I guess, analysis of what's going on with rail and transit commuting. We had explored some options to potentially piggyback on, some of the existing subscriptions, but I think some internal direction has taken us to procure our own license. So nothing else to report on that. We still have to get that analysis performed before we can start to make any additional changes to the system. I suspect we'll come back in the next couple of months and report on some of the updates that we have.
Sounds great.
some weekend trains and some commuting trains.
We're gonna look at transit, rail ridership, but also just general commuting patterns as well in the VRA service. See where there's some areas of opportunity for teachers.
Sounds good.
Ridership continues to climb. The mandates are having their effect, so you're starting to see more people head back to the office, which is expected. As you've seen, congestion sucks, so that's always good. And as congestion sucks, parking declines, and parking is the enemy of transit. When it's cheap and free, people drive their car. One item of note for your calendars, on December 6th, there's always the NVTC, it's a joint NVTC PRTC legislative event, and that's where the two organizations discuss the legislative agenda for the next year. So it's a good opportunity to have good guest speakers. I forget who we've got this year, but generally you have the chair of both organizations speak, myself, Rich Dalton, educate the types of NVTC, et cetera. So if you're interested, please reach out to me. We'll make sure you're going to get the information, the invite, et cetera. But it's at usually in Springfield, I don't remember if it's the Embassy Suites, but they change it every so often, so I don't want to commit to that. But you could poke around their website, I'm sure, and find it quite easily. If you have any questions, reach out. We'd love to have you.
Sounds good.
Hey, Carl, let's not catch you in Colville.
Sure. Off we go.
I'll say lastly for us, spots meeting, we're excited that with the election news last night, our bond referendum transition passed 101.7 million. The ones for public safety and schools also passed in Spotsylvania, so it was, I'll say banner night for that. And basically, the transition, I think it was a 58-42 vote in favor. So we're very stoked about that. That'll help us advance some of our VA projects and other regional projects. Working on the VA.
And you sent my tax bill out yesterday too. 3:44 a.m. this morning.
Susan is not ready to keep taxes.
Right.
Oh, I keep glad you work in Spotsylvania.
On that note,
On that note.
the next meeting is on December 6th at 9:30. Is there anything else in there? A good, a motion to adjourn? Sounds good.